When your narcissistic abuse is extremely deep, it means that you have been completely collapsed. Everything that you ever loved, everything that you believed in, everything that you dreamed of has been devalued, inverted, and you were left with nothing, smeared, left in the mud, and everybody turned against you. It is very hard not to get completely encompassed by the narcissistic illusion that is surrounding you and not to be morphed into what that reality is striving to define you as. Many people have been transformed into what they were painted as because of that false reality, believing that this was the true them, since everybody thinks that way. When everyone thinks the same thing, it feels like it must be true. There is no way of convincing them otherwise. If you have been deep enough, you know that you felt like you were working against a smear around you and that you simply could not win. What the narcissist seeded in the minds of people around you was reinforced by how they also worked on you, shaping and transforming you. The prejudice planted in others then begins to match the way you behave. You feel the atmosphere they created, and it changes the way you behave because the environment becomes hostile toward you. You can feel it. It is heavy, sticky, suffocating, as if you cannot move in it. I experience this almost like an internal sense of smell. Not with the nose, but within the body. You can sense these things internally. And that constant pressure alters how you exist. Then even people who were not originally prejudiced by the narcissist begin to see you through the way you now behave. This builds their false perception of you. At that point, you have no chance to convince anyone otherwise. You don't have the tools anymore. You have been transformed. You cannot win. It is impossible. You have been caught. At that point, you feel deeply betrayed by what we call humanity. Not only by the narcissist, but by people in general, by their lack of insight and by how easily they are mesmerized by words and false realities presented as truth. When you fall into this trap, no one comes to help you. You begin to see that you are alone in the world. You begin to see the human form itself as something that can hurt you, not only the narcissist, but people as a whole. This is what very deep narcissistic abuse looks like. Many people were never this deep, and tragically, they may go on to abuse those who were. They misidentify trauma responses as narcissism and sometimes build new smear campaigns on top of old ones. Narcissistic abuse, if it goes deep enough, allows you to see the workings of the narcissistic world with absolute clarity. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. The more you stop feeding into the illusion by participating in what society tells you is normal, workplaces, cultural systems, family structures, religion, organizations, traditions, and everything that grants a societal badge of being good and decent, the more you begin to see. Because these systems nourish you narcissistically, and you nourish them in return. When you stop feeding into that exchange and stop feeding off it, the illusion weakens, and what remains is clarity. It is as if these patterns start to appear right in front of your eyes. You begin to see the life force extraction machines everywhere, their cogs, their guards, and the way the illusion is being fed to everyone involved so they cannot see it. When you see this, it makes you feel extremely alone. Usually, there is no one around you who can see what you see. Not because you are crazy, but because the narcissistic world must be structured this way in order to function. It is always about winning the majority. It works like elections. You only need to create a perception that feeds what society already wants. You only need the majority. You don't care about the rest, because you have already won. That is how it works. If you try to tell illusioned people what is really going on, they will see you as crazy. This is exactly why the narcissistic structure works at all. People automatically dismiss anything that does not fit into their program. They are programmed. They believe they think for themselves, but they do not. Their minds are full of dams and separations, even around specific subjects like energy. People are conditioned not to look into energy at all, because they were taught that it is a sin. And if you do not look into energy, you cannot see how it operates. People do not want to be bad. They do not want to be demonized. And they know that if they step outside these rules, that is exactly what will happen. Anyone who looks where they were told not to look will be labeled and rejected. So the narcissistic world does not function only because some wealthy people control the masses. It works because the masses choose to close their eyes. Because of their beliefs, they choose not to see. Within the masses there are many narcissists, not necessarily malignant, but mild, normalized, socially approved narcissists. This is actually the most dangerous form. This is the main narcissistic frequency, the primary feeding ground, the main production machine of life force extraction. For the world to change, the masses would have to change. The masses are what run the entire matrix. Individual change can start something, if change ever comes at all. I am not even sure it will. For me, speaking about these things is soothing. Perhaps it is soothing for you too, to know that someone else sees what you see. At the very least, it can give you a better experience of life for yourself, and from that place you broadcast a different energy. But if not enough people do this, nothing changes. I am not claiming that change will happen. Honestly, when I look around, I do not think it will. This is simply how I see things. It can happen, but I'm not going to tell you that it will happen, or that everything will magically change. I don't do that because it makes people go to sleep. It creates the feeling that we're doing something while someone else is taking care of everything. That is not how it works. Change is individual. Not even work, individual change. Each person, on their own. Not by looking at leaders, not by following figures, not by being a sheep. Change can only take place if individuals break away from the matrix with as little expenditure of energy as possible and go on to live their lives outside of it. What is also important is not having a mission. Not becoming a fighter against injustice, not fighting narcissism, not trying to expose or rebel. The change happens simply by stopping feeding the matrix and stopping feeding off it. When you live your life from a place of joy outside the matrix, you naturally broadcast humane energy. Even if you are in the middle of a forest, you are doing more than someone who is constantly fighting for justice. That doesn't mean nothing matters, because some things do matter, but not when people are pulled into those battles and slowly transformed into narcissistic energy themselves. You can still observe. You can still note things. But you must not let yourself be transformed into those frequencies. Because once that happens, you are producing the same output. The same food, the same electrical current that runs the matrix, only under the illusion of good intention. And I include myself in this. If you want to broadcast humane energy, you should not think about it. You simply live. You enjoy yourself. You enjoy your time. You build your humanity without putting importance on it. The moment you turn it into something important, it becomes narcissistic. Do not listen to people who call you selfish for not watching the news, for not engaging in gossip, or for not participating in collective outrage. That is a narcissistic tool used to pull you back into the production zone. They say that because they need your energy. They are programmed. Your energy is a resource in the matrix, and you are expected to be useful there. That usefulness means your energy must be transformed into a form that the narcissistic system can consume, energy tuned to a parasitic frequency. This is the main frequency most people produce. That is why news, movies, media, and even many online platforms and channels are so popular when they run on narcissistic frequency. That is why religious organizations produce so much suffering, glorify suffering, demand suffering. It is because suffering is narcissistic frequency. That is why work environments are designed either to exhaust you completely or to suppress you by giving you nothing meaningful to do. Both lead to the same outcome, depletion or suppression of humane energy. If work were structured in a humane way, you would not need to run endlessly. You would do what needs to be done in a few focused hours. You would experience pleasure in interaction, creativity, and challenge. Even stress would feel different, more like excitement, like riding a good roller coaster. Balanced, energizing, and alive, not disorienting, draining, or nauseating when you step off. But the world is structured for you to produce that energy. Everything is designed that way. So when you start to see it, it's not that you are weird, it's that the world itself is insane. Most people start to feel like something is wrong with them. Like, I see this, so it must be only me. And then they feel they cannot talk about it. And it's fine not to talk about it. In fact, it's often better not to talk about it with people who are illusioned. Because honestly, if I had never gone through narcissistic abuse, I would probably be the same. I don't blame them. I don't think they are bad or stupid. You simply need to find people who have the same perception. And maybe, when enough people step away from the magic, some change will happen. But it is not guaranteed. The moment you build your life with as much independence as possible, and when the system cannot catch you easily, it will leave you alone to a large degree. It will still try. It will still present itself as something good. It will tell you that you are a good person if you work 12 hours a day, that you are good for the team. You exhaust yourself, your home life collapses, but at least you are good for the team. But if you work normal hours, then you are suddenly bad at work. Whatever you do, you get a bad definition somewhere. That's how it is. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Inside these systems, you cannot win. Once you step away, these dynamics disappear. You start to see how humane reality actually works, simply because none of this exists there. At first, it's good to be alone, if you can be. You build that foundation. And then, at some point, people may enter your life. Even one person can be enough. And if no one comes, that is also fine. That is just how it is. Even when you build independence, you still have to be selective about what you allow into your reality. Otherwise, you risk being transformed into a frequency that pulls you back into the matrix. But that is a small price to pay for freedom and for feeling your humanity. Because when you are free, the world feels completely different. It looks different. You realize you don't need much money anymore, because you are no longer buying protection. You are not surrounding yourself with things to shield yourself from people. When you do buy something, it is for your own enjoyment, not to prevent being crushed or rejected. Much of this is subconscious. You may not realize that you were buying, performing, or striving simply to avoid rejection. Once you stop feeding the system, you begin to see how much of your effort was about fitting into the narcissistic world. Sacrifice, overwork, exhaustion, constant striving, chasing better, and a definition of goodness that is never stable, all of this is narcissistic consciousness at work. People who are narcissistically polluted will often attack those who step outside, because their minds are programmed to do so by the parasite running them. It is not really them. It is parasitic consciousness operating through them, almost like zombies. People are being used to build structures and realities that support life force extraction. Most of the time, they don't know what they are doing. And even when they think they do, the parasite is often already operating through their conscious mind. People do horrible things believing they are doing the right thing. They believe they are morally superior and that others deserve to be treated badly. This is blindness. It is trickery. Everything is inverted and distorted. You only see this when you stop feeding the system and step away from it. Even then, pollution happens. I get polluted often. I have to be careful and selective. The key is not to be caught.